In this episode of Eager to Know, why taking a break can make all the difference, and the crazy pre-cell phone concept of having to set places and times to meet friends. We all have a creative part of our brain, whether we use it or not, for generating new ideas, problem solving, and just viewing ourselves in this world. I am Ricky McGeckran, an artist living in Chicago, and I am eager to know and share with you all how people of a creative leaning have brought this way of thinking to the forefront and how it has shifted outcomes. Brad Leslie is a Chicago-based artist. We used to share a studio together along with fellow painter David Joseph. Brad was a great studio mate, his artwork was inspiring to be around, and we had a very creative, supportive relationship. So do you think it's helpful to be around other people in the production of the work? Or would the best case scenario for you to be, you're working by yourself and then you usher everybody in for feedback when it's available, when you need it?
That's a great question. It depends, it really depends on the kind of day I'm having.
Sure.
Right? Some days I just want to go and I want to be left. You know how it is. I mean, we're artists. I want to go. I want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody. And then other days, like when David's there, I really enjoy that because it's motivating. And I think that, like when you were there and when David's there, I think it's good because we have this understanding. It's an open workspace, but if I'm over here doing my thing and you're over there doing yours, we don't need to talk necessarily.
Sure.
But it's there if you want to.
Right. So
I do find being in an open space like that challenging sometimes.
Okay.
Especially when other people are, that don't really belong in the space are coming through.
Yes, and I've definitely witnessed that happening, and the disruption it causes. Right. So you mentioned that sometimes you like to go to the studio and not want to talk to anyone. Do you feel that being in that creative space is a source of comfort to you when, say, you're not feeling your best or you're in a bad mood? Does being in that creative space, do you see that as like an escape type of situation?
Yeah, well put, and very much so. It is, and sometimes it's a challenge for me because it's all the way over on the other side of town.
Yeah,
and I believe this is, a factor for you why you moved. One of the reasons, because sometimes when I think about that commute, especially
it's daunting.
It's daunting, especially on the Red Line. I like sitting on the train and getting there, but you see, it's like you see a lot.
But once you get there, you feel.
Once I get there and I'm in the space, then I feel like I can shut the door and shut out pretty much all the other things I have on my mind.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, do you ever feel that process of creating the painting is stressful because it's problem solving? At least for me, it is. I always feel like it's a problem solving project. Does that cause you stress and distress, or is it just a purely escapist experience for you, where anything related to stress is gone? It's all, you're just in this little world.
Well, I would love it if it was purely escapist.
Yeah.
But that said, I think that you hit on it. It's solving a puzzle. And I like that kind of challenge because if I'm not in the studio trying to solve problems like that I've created with a piece of work, then I'm applying that to other things in my life, maybe, not in the best way possible. So it's sort of like sublimation for me. It's sort of like I'm taking all this sort of obsessive compulsive energy and putting it into a painting.
And you're putting it into something that you really can really influence, as opposed to when you're trying to solve puzzles and problems in the world outside the studio. There's so much that's not in your control, whereas you're pretty much in control of what goes on the canvas.
Yeah, exactly right. Because you realize that outside of the studio, I mean, even in the studio, sometimes, a painting's not going well and you don't know what to do. And you have to, like, I have learned sometimes I just have to walk away. But in life, I mean, in life, that's harder to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes sometimes that is sometimes I think that is a good thing to do when you have a problem in life. You can't fully walk away, but at least take a break.
Well, and I can give you a really good example of that. I was working on one of the pieces I've been working on currently, which is a portrait, and portraits are always challenging because it has to look like that person, or it has to have, the essence. For me, it's about getting the essence of the person.
Sure.
So I was working on a current piece that I'm working on, and it was very close to being right.
Yep.
Except the face was too long.
Right.
So it's like, well, I can either, move the eyes down and shorten the face that way, or move the mouth up.
Okay.
And the eyes were great, so I was like, no, I'm not going to mess with those.
Yep.
And that was David's advice, which was great. It was his input. But I was stuck because I thought, I really like this, but I need to fix it, but I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
That situation?
Yep.
So I left it alone for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And mainly because I was scared of it. It was daunting. But then when I went back to it, it was amazing that once I started, it just all fell into place.
Something opened up.
Well, and I will tell you that what I think it is when there is a problem and you do walk away from it, your subconscious mind my subconscious mind keeps working on it.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you've had that experience.
Right? Yeah, I mean, I think that, yes, I've had that experience, but also I kind of relate that to like dreams, because I feel like dreaming is your brain processing and resolving things that are happening in the real world. So you kind of wake up refreshed. I think that's why you wake up refreshed when you have a problem. You go to sleep and sleep on it. Mm-hmm. You wake up the next morning. And I kind of feel like that's the same thing with paintings. Mm-hmm. I know that for certain, if I'm working on a painting all day, when I come in the next morning, it looks completely different.
Oh,
completely different.
Absolutely. And you could be in this. That's why it's just important to take breaks. And which I'm not, by the way, I'm not great at.
So do you feel like that sort of applies to other areas in life for you? That taking a break, sleeping on it in general? I mean, do you think that's kind of a universal concept that everyone would appreciate? That just taking a break, your brain is going to keep working on it and trying to resolve.
I do. In fact, I recently read. I started reading about. I read a lot about time management because it's an issue for me, and there's something called the. I don't know if you're familiar. It's called the Pomodoro method.
I'm not familiar with this.
Okay, and it's very, very simple. There's more to it, but I'm going to give you the very simple version, which is just you work for about 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
And that's the basis of it. And so because I love apps and they help me structure things. And I find as an artist, especially doing my own thing, I really need to impose that structure. But there's an app that I started using, and I was in the studio the other day, and I was using it, and it was revolutionary to me because I have never worked this way before.
Meaning taking a break after 25 minutes.
Yeah. And the science behind that is that like 25 minutes is about the sweet spot. After 25 minutes, your mind starts to stray a bit. Okay. So with the 5-minute break, again, you come back refreshed and maybe you have a few minutes to let, a problem or whatever you're working on, you let it simmer a little bit, and then you go back.
Okay. In that 5 minutes, what do you do? Do you walk away completely?
I walk away completely.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't know.
Do you meditate, or do you like go check email, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I just started doing it. So what I did was, sometimes, like a couple times I just sat there, and just allowed myself to sit and think, because frankly, being always on, because we are, right, with our phones, it doesn't give us that downtime. It doesn't give me the downtime.
Yeah.
So there are times when like when you used to sit sort of and daydream, maybe you were on the bus or maybe whatever. And now that we have our phones, there's a constant distraction.
Okay.
So I sometimes mindfully, and I did that a few times during these breaks, just mindfully said, okay, I'm not going to do anything right now. I'm going to put down the phone. I'm going to put everything down, and I'm just going to hang out and maybe look around the room.
Okay.
And just be.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I started doing this summer was because I live in Andersonville, and which is in Chicago, and we're right near the lake. And walking along the lake in the nice weather is really easy to do. It's quite lovely.
Right.
But I would leave my phone at home.
Oh,
so
that's great.
I would go by myself, and I wasn't listening to music. I wasn't on Facebook or other apps, and I was just focusing on my breathing and observing the world. And it's kind of crazy, but since 2007, when the iPhone came out, then that's that concept of doing that is insane. And I had a friend of mine who I won't mention this person's name, who we were going to go for walks because this person wanted to do that.
Right.
And I told them, you can come with me, but you have to leave your phone at home. And that was that was a deal breaker.
Really?
Yeah. So it
that
never.
is
so it never
fascinating.
happened. So I'm still going to work on him. But I mean, when I was a kid, we used to go to I lived down the street from the Burlington Mall, which was this gigantic mall. We used to go there all the time, and we would constantly having to be meet each other
right
at the payphone in front of Friendly's.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to time it. We didn't have anything.
Right.
So you had to rely on honoring your commitment to your friend and showing up.
Right,
So,
where you couldn't just, bag out at the last minute.
No, you had to be there
with a text. Yeah.
So.
No, it's it's definitely different. And what used to be the default has become the exception.
Yeah.
Where, like, taking a 2-hour walk and purposefully saying, you know what, I'm not gonna bring my phone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna unplug. I'm gonna get past the anxiety of doing that. And yeah, I find that idea, I have to build that into if I do it, I have to build it into my day.
Okay.
But, I started using, especially at the studio, and I need to develop this habit more, but I started using the driving mode on my phone.
Which means it doesn't alert you?
No, what it does is it sends anybody trying to get a hold of you a text.
Oh, I've seen that.
And yeah, and it's just, it's like an auto text feature saying, whatever the message you want to send, it'll send it. And then it also says, if this is an emergency, text back emergency, and it will come through.
Okay.
So I love that. I think it's that feature's long overdue, and I love it. I just need to remember to use it more. Yeah.
So tell me about when you started producing artwork. Was this something that you did as a kid? Were you the artsy kid?
Oh yeah. Well, because it was for me, I was very, very you wouldn't know it now, but I was very introverted growing up, and I was very shy.
That That is surprising.
Because I'm pretty much the opposite now, and I'm much more demonstrative and talkative and all of those things, but I still have those tendencies. And
so art did something for you?
Art was I think art was everything. It was I've heard other people talk about. I wasn't an only child, but I was in situations where I was alone a lot.
Okay.
And so that was my world. It was the world of make believe and the world of creating things. So I used to make these little construction paper cities.
Okay.
And I was always interested in creating and doing something with my hands. And then
what age was this about?
Oh God, this was probably preschool.
Oh, okay. So little.
Yeah.
So you were always creating something.
Yeah, and then the first art project in memory that I remember is, I think it was second grade, and the assignment was to do a self-portrait. And I remember I did the self-portrait. I sort of vaguely remember it as far as what it looked like, but I think we did it we used to use tempera paint, like poster paints. Remember those?
Yeah, I do remember those.
And I just remember my teacher loved it and put it, I don't know, maybe how there used to be, like, they would put it in a display case or something in the hallway. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
And I got such a thrill out of that.
Meaning being set as something special.
Yeah, and that I could do this. I could make something, and that someone else would appreciate it that way. And I think from that point on, I was hooked.
Wow.
Because that's that speaks to the power of teachers, right? And just adults in your life giving you that kind of encouragement.
It's funny. I recorded a podcast before you, and the person mentioned teachers as well, and I meant to mention this because it means so much to me, that I think that the power of teachers is really underrated. Whenever I meet someone that tells me that they're a teacher, particularly like an elementary school teacher,
right,
I tell them, you have the most important job, because teachers can make such a difference. I mean, my third grade teacher, Miss Mack, I was sort of a little bit of a problem child in like first and second grade, and Miss Mack, she changed me, and she embraced me. I don't know what she did, but I became behaved, and she kind of changed my self-esteem.
Was Adderall around then?
It was not.
Did she put it in your juice?
She didn't, but I definitely would have been on it when I was a kid. But no, she definitely made such an impact on me, and my fourth grade teacher as well. And that's what this guy Brian, who I was talking to, he had a similar experience with a teacher who introduced him to theater, and he said it just changed him. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I do think that teachers can make such an amazing difference.
Yeah, and it's a double-edged sword too, right? Because I was fortunate in that I had that experience in second grade, and then in high school again, I had this wonderful teacher who was so encouraging, and it was the same thing. I thought, well, okay, that was really the difference between saying, okay, I don't know if I can do this, and I can do this.
Meaning in art or just in general?
Definitely in art, but I think for me, there's transference, right? Like if I can be successful in one area, which is, again, as a painter, and I mean like an individual painting, maybe it's like, oh, well, I worked on this and I created this and I love the results. Well, for me, that like bolsters me in the rest of my life.
Of course.
Because if I'm feeling good about my work, I tend to feel good about other things.
Yes.
Just as if I'm not feeling good about my work, because there's many times when I feel like, okay, I'm a fraud. I don't know how to paint. Sometimes you walk in the studio. I don't know about you, but I walk in the studio and I think, okay, I'm starting from scratch. I know nothing. And I have to relearn everything. It's like, I was like paralyzed and I'm learning to walk again.
So that's interesting that you talk about, what did you call it? Transference?
Yeah.
So if you are, so do you think it's a good thing that the way you feel about things yourself in other areas of your life is affected by what you can do in the studio? Because I think that's common, that people are going to feel, get a self-esteem boost if they're having successes at work. But I mean, but then there's the school of thought that it shouldn't really matter.
Right.
How you feel about yourself should be should not be affected by this physical world type of thing.
Well, yeah, in a perfect world.
Okay.
Right. I in a perfect world, and that's the goal. Like I would love it if my self-esteem wasn't tied to anything external, but I have a long way to go.
Yeah.
And I would rather have it be tied to my work than other external things that I have much less control over.
Yeah. So I think that we could work this to our advantage, because we talked about how when you're in front of your canvas, you do have a lot of control and influence on what you're producing. Right. So if you are linking how you feel about yourself and in the world to what's happening on the canvas, at least it's something that you do have some control over. I know that for me...
It's still going to be mercurial, though, depending upon how your day goes in the studio.
Yeah, no, that's true. I know that I can, and I don't know if this is good or bad, but I know that like working out, like lifting weights, stretching and running, like those are things that I love to do.
Yeah.
And they make, when I'm in a lot of control over that. When I'm in the gym, I don't have any distractions. I'm not thinking about anything else other than my workout. In my run, I'm pretty much in control of that.
Right.
And so that is a section of my day where it's a little bit of a booster, like a self-esteem booster, because I know that I'm going to be getting predictable results and I can really kind of control it. And it's kind of helpful. Does that make sense?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly, because I think those, like you pinpointed two areas that, there's a lot of control there. You can control like showing up and being there, and you can't always control how you feel that day. But and I'm speaking to exercise and working out, but I will say that I have never gone to the gym in a bad mood and not felt better when it was over.
Okay.
So the results of that are always predictable.
Yeah. Well, and I think that in general, I mean, this is going like in a different topic, but I think that like physical activity, like the gym, running and exercise, I think that it is a huge booster to mood, anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
I think that it definitely, and those aren't things that I have huge issues with, but it definitely, I do have them like any human being.
Right.
And they definitely improve all of it. And I think that it seems to me like that's something that people could adopt and it would be very helpful.
Yeah. Well, and it goes back to that word again, transference, right? Because I think that if I'm not feeling great emotionally, mentally, whatever, if I can get myself to do those things, if I can get myself moving, and that's not, I can't always, but if I can get myself moving, if I can switch up that energy, because I think that's what it is for me. And once I change that energy a bit and get things moving a little bit, then it becomes easier. And just as I think when I think about, or when I actually get to the studio, like if I'm at home, and this was the detriment to working at home. There were too many distractions, and it was too hard to shut those things out. I did it, but it was much more challenging.
Yep.
So yeah, just sometimes even just being in a different space.
Yeah.
Makes a difference to me.
Yep. I would agree.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a question that everyone probably asks you, which is, where do you get your inspiration? I know that when I was in the studio with you, I was surrounded by your paintings. It was basically what was decorating the walls of our cavernous studio. And they're very interesting. Your subject matter is very
Thank
unique.
you.
And I mean that in a very positive way. It's
Thank
very
you.
unique. It's very strong. Can you tell me, what can you tell me about where this comes from?
Sure. I think it depends on what I'm doing. I've always, so I mentioned working on portraits. That was really, again, it goes back to when I was very young. I mean, that was the first thing I ever did, was I did a self-portrait, and then I would sit and draw portraits of other people out of magazines and things.
Okay.
And I would do pencil drawings. So that's one thing that fascinates me. And
what fascinates you? Doing
portraiture and,
okay.
and just because, especially if it's a commission, it's sort of not that it's collaborative in the true sense of the word, but I think it's sort of passively collaborative, because that person, yeah, they want you, like they want your style, whatever, in that work, hopefully, but it's sort of like, almost meeting them halfway, where you still have to capture something, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just going into the studio and doing absolutely whatever you want.
Understood. Do you think that knowing the person, like I know you did a portrait of our friend John, who you know very well,
right?
Does that influence the output?
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, in fact, the method I have found that I really like to use when it comes to this is, because I work from photographs exclusively. And so I love to have somebody come to my studio and hang out for a while. I did this with the current piece I'm working on, and this was a new friend, and we were just getting to know each other.
Okay.
But he hung out in the studio all day, and I do think for me, it's just,
were you painting him?
No,
or was he just,
no,
you were
no,
working
no.
on something else.
Yeah, no, and I was well, we were basically just hanging out, and we were talking, and ostensibly I was working on something else, but not really. But it was good, because I think that part of what I want to capture in a portrait, it's not just about getting that perfect likeness.
Yep.
Because to me, everybody has seen those, right? They're sort of, they can be sort of institutional. Like, you think of the like cliche of like this old banker, in a 3-piece suit. No, it's more about if I'm around somebody and I see the way they move, and I see their mannerisms, and it's their countenance, right? And that informs what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And it informs it subconsciously. So it's that thing where maybe it's not, when I'm with someone, maybe it's not registering that I'm, taking in this information.
Yep.
But I am.
Yeah.
And I know it because I've tried to do portraits where that hasn't happened, and they're much more challenging.
Right. Do you think it's a situation where if you step away and you have a couple nights sleep, your brain is sort of, reassembling the story for you?
I do. I think there's a lot to be said. I think that another challenge for me these days is everything people want to move so fast, and people do move really fast, and everything just, seems to click along at this great clip. And the thing about art is, and this axiom is true, art takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that I have to let things simmer and marinate and to use all those cooking analogies, but they do, and it's helpful if they do. For me, that's definitely part of my process.
Okay.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah. So other things, I mean, I can talk about the last series that I did, which was really planned out, and it was for a show, which is great because, as you know, having that goal, having that objective really helps line things up.
Yep.
So yeah, I wanted to explore some different themes, and for me, the inspiration was because I like to paint a lot of disparate things.
Okay.
And I wanted to figure out a way that I could create a framework to paint different objects and different images that I was interested in, but have it be more cohesive. So
meaning each piece of work would be cohesive?
Each piece of work, but then the series itself.
Okay.
So let's say I did 8 pieces and I wanted a common theme to run throughout them. So I think I picked like 3 or 4 types of imagery and juxtaposed those into these digital collages, and then painted those made the paintings, the physical paintings,
okay.
Oil on canvas from the collages.
Okay.
And that was, and I like, that was just a method of working that I had seen another painter do something similar, and I asked her about her process, and she was kind enough to share that with me. And so I thought, okay, well then I can do this. And yeah, I love that because again, one of my biggest challenges as a painter is narrowing the scope of what I'm doing and trying to really hone in.
Meaning having everything like, what do you mean by that?
As far as subject matter and whittling it down to the essence of what moves me.
Okay.
Right? Because if I have to find something in that subject that resonates with me, or
totally
right, or it represents something in my personality or my psyche or within me that I want to express on the canvas.
Completely.
Right?
And I will tell you what I do, because you're spending a lot of time with this subject matter.
Right.
So you have to feel either like it, or you have to feel inspired by it,
exactly.
or you have to feel that what you're expressing is something important.
Right.
So what I do is, I don't know if you remember this, I do tons of sketches beforehand, and I call it dating. So I'm basically dating the subject matter to see if I'm ready for a commitment.
I hadn't heard you use that term before. I've seen you do it, but dating, that's a great way to phrase it.
So I'll just do I'll do a bunch of, it could, in some cases, it's quite a few sketches. And sometimes I will do a quick acrylic painting or a quick watercolor painting to see if this really,
speed dating.
Speed dating. Is there something in here? Because sometimes you think a painting is going to be, you think there's something special.
Right.
And once you start doing it, you're like, there's really nothing here.
Right.
And then sometimes a subject matter, it looks like it might be interesting, and once you start with it, you're like, wow, this is great. There's some shapes in here that you can really bring out in the painting. But yeah, so I call it dating, and to see if I am ready for a commitment. So it sounds like you kind of do something similar or?
Well, yeah, I think that definitely doing the doing the digital, putting the digital collages together definitely serves that purpose. But what I want to say too is absolutely, and I think I want to employ that what you just said, doing that more. Maybe I have a hard time. I don't when I do a painting though, like if unless it's based on one of the collages, I don't ever sketch.
You don't? Okay.
No, not anymore. And I like the immediacy of the paint, but
Yep.
and I'm pretty confident, that when I do find something that and it could be anything, but when it interests me and it strikes my fancy or moves me or whatever, I'm pretty confident about it. But I guess maybe I spend more time in my head, and it might behoove me to do some of that sketching, because like I do spend an awful lot of time thinking about what I'm going to paint.
Yeah, and if you put it on the paper, maybe that could help.
Exactly.
Help the process go quicker.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we talked about had to do with being in the studio, but we also made a lot of mapping to things in the real world.
Right.
So are there a couple things that you could tell people that are listening to this that could help them move things forward in their life, or to help them embrace their creativity, or to
Sure.
get themselves unstuck?
Well, the unstuck one is good, because obviously, if you're a creative person, you're going to experience that. And I experience times where I feel very stuck. I think that one of the ways I have found to work with that is I am very much a technology person. So I use a lot of apps. I use Pinterest for that very reason.
Okay, to
because
get inspiration.
I do, and I love keeping inspiration boards, and I love the feature in Pinterest where it will show you things that you might be interested
Okay,
in,
and I feel like it's accurate.
Not always,
All right,
and I think how there's an algorithm. So the more things that you click that you like, or however it's done, I forgot, but the more accurate it's going to be,
Okay.
obviously. But yeah, I have discovered new artists, new painters that I like. I have discovered them that way.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and so that I read. I don't know if we talked about this, but you're familiar with The Artist's Way.
Yes.
Okay. So I did after having the book for 20 years, I did the course, and it made a lot of sense, because she talks about this thing called filling the well.
Okay.
And this is a part of the process that I realized after doing the exercises in that book, it's very important. So, meaning you allow yourself this time to basically wick things up.
Okay.
Right? You have to be a sponge, and even to the point where she has you going out and taking yourself out on these little field trips.
Okay.
Because they're inspiring.
Yes.
And it doesn't. There's not a lightning bolt that comes out of the sky and hits you. Sometimes there is,
Okay.
right? And that's nice when that happens. But so much of this, I think, comes with some careful planning, and or I should say deliberate planning, right? Like, okay, I'm gonna spend an hour in my studio today looking at images.
Mm-hmm.
That's essential.
Yes.
And when I get stuck, a lot of times that does get me unstuck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So the other thing I want to say is, so much of it, as you know, is showing up even when you don't feel like it. And
I agree with that.
If I waited to be inspired to show up, then I would be waiting a long time. So that's it.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. This was a really fun conversation.
Absolutely. I had a blast. So it was great. Thank you. Thank you for asking.
You're very welcome. And where can people see your art or learn more about you?
Okay. So I am on Instagram at Bradley Lowell. And then my website is bradleyleslie.com. So should I spell that?
Yeah, spell it.
Okay. BradleyLeslie.com.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ricky McGuckran, and you have been listening to Eager to Know, the podcast. If you haven't already, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join me next week for another Eager to Know podcast.